Alright folks, buckle up. This video is dropping like a bombshell, claiming to expose never-before-seen details about Donald Trump's alleged ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times is leading the charge, promising to reveal how close they really were. But let's be real, how much of this is genuine, hard-hitting investigative journalism, and how much is just another carefully crafted hit piece designed to generate clicks, outrage, and politically convenient narratives? Grab your popcorn, because we're about to pull back the curtain on this whole spectacle. We're going to look at the facts, the implications, and what the establishment wants you to believe versus what the evidence actually suggests. Trust me, it's going to be a wild ride, and we're going to call out the nonsense every step of the way.
Today, new reporting from the New York Times reveals never-before-seen details about the relationship between President Trump and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The deeply sourced story details just how close Epstein and Trump were and what brought them together. It's in direct contrast to a Trump lawyer's claims that the future president and Epstein did not socialize together and were never really friends. Joining me now, the man behind that story, New York Times political and investigative reporter Nicholas Confessore. Nick, I want you to take us inside this reporting. How close were they really?
I think they were as close as any other friends that they had. And I think that Jeffrey Epstein thought he was Donald Trump's closest friend for a period. They spent a lot of time talking on the phone about women and sexual conquests. They spent time at Trump Tower or over at Jeffrey Epstein's offices nearby on Madison Avenue. They flew on each other's planes, and they partied together a lot. At a lot of parties with women, people who are younger than they are. And I think what brought them together was women and sexual conquest.
All right, hold on a second. Women and sexual conquest brought them together? Let's not mince words here. We're talking about two incredibly wealthy, powerful men navigating a social scene that, let's just say, wasn't exactly known for its monastic vows or its adherence to traditional family values. Is it genuinely surprising that men of that caliber, with that kind of lifestyle, would be focused on women and sexual conquest as a common interest? It's like saying two professional golfers bonded over their love of hitting small white balls with sticks. It's what they do. It's part of the environment they inhabit. To frame this as some sort of unique, sinister bond, rather than a common denominator in a certain echelon of society, feels disingenuous. Now, before anyone gets their knickers in a twist, let me be crystal clear. I am not, for 1 nanosecond, defending Jeffrey Epstein's monstrous actions. What he did was abhorrent, pure evil, and he deserved every second of whatever hell he experienced. He was a predator of the worst kind, and his crimes are beyond reprehensible. But let's keep some perspective when we talk about the social circles of the super rich and famous. These aren't your typical PTA meetings, folks, where everyone's discussing bake sales and school budgets. These are circles where money talks, power dominates, and often a certain level of moral ambiguity, or at least a relaxed interpretation of ethical boundaries, becomes the de facto currency. The air in those rooms is thick with ambition, ego, and often a casual disregard for conventional norms. The New York Times is trying to paint a very specific picture here, and it's a very particular shade of lurid red. They emphasize the women and sexual conquest bit, which, while probably true in a general sense for men like them, is clearly designed to evoke a particular unsettling image in your mind before they even get to the crucial disclaimer. It's classic narrative shaping, a rhetorical sleight of hand. They want you to feel a certain way, to assume a certain depth of sinister connection, even when they're forced by journalistic ethics, barely, to admit there's no indication, we have no proof that Donald Trump did anything that was criminal or related to the criminal activities. See that little disclaimer? It's buried, almost an afterthought, a quick whisper after the shout. The headline, the dramatic lead-in, the juicy details about women and sexual conquest, that's what hits you first. That's what sticks in your memory. It's the journalistic equivalent of saying, this cake is absolutely delicious, but just so you know, it might contain a tiny, unproven amount of poison. Just kidding, no proof of poison. But you're still thinking about the poison, aren't you? The seed of suspicion has been planted, watered, and given a grow light, all while technically adhering to the letter, but certainly not the spirit, of factual reporting. This isn't just about reporting the news. It's about manufacturing a narrative, about creating a guilt by association cloud that hangs over Donald Trump like a bad smell. The media loves to connect dots, even if those dots are miles apart, separated by vast oceans of circumstantial evidence, and connected only by a thin, imaginary string of insinuation. When it comes to Donald Trump, that string gets even thinner, and the dots become almost invisible, but boy, do they try to connect them. They're like a conspiracy theorist with a red string and a corkboard, desperately trying to link every celebrity and politician to something nefarious. The goal isn't always to prove guilt in a court of law. Sometimes it's just to create association, to plant a seed of doubt, to ensure that every time you hear Epstein, a little part of your brain, conditioned by these headlines, whispers, Trump. It's a subtle but incredibly effective smear tactic, a form of character assassination by insinuation, and we see it deployed against conservatives and anyone challenging the establishment narrative constantly. They can't beat him on policy, they can't beat him on his economic record, so they try to beat him on character, even if they have to stretch the truth like a rubber band about to snap. This isn't journalism, it's political warfare, plain and simple, dressed up in the guise of reporting, and it's why so many people have lost faith in the mainstream media. They've cried wolf so many times that when there's a real wolf, nobody's listening.
Now, we should say that there's no indication. We have no proof that Donald Trump did anything that was criminal or related to the criminal activities that put Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. Having said that, you actually spoke to a former assistant of Epstein's. And I thought, well, how do we know all of this? Because you get into some pretty specific details. He actually let assistants listen in on the phone calls with Donald Trump?
Yeah, it was a power play. So we spoke to several former assistants and employees of Jeffrey Epstein's, and he had a habit of putting Donald Trump and other famous friends on the phone. It was partly a power play and partly a way that he groomed people. See how powerful I am. I can put this person on the phone. I can get them on the phone. I can put them on speaker. We're friends. That's how powerful I am. It was a way that he groomed people. And he would put Donald Trump on the phone. They would talk about sex.
In response to your question, the White House called it a fake story, which is not worth the paper it's printed on, just another stale regurgitation of decades-old false allegations, adding that President Trump did nothing wrong and he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. In fact, again, Trump has never been implicated in this wrongdoing. So is this about, as people are looking to hear from him, is it about what he observed, maybe what he knew? And is it even more important given that we are expecting more Epstein files to be released?
Well, look, based on our interviews and a scouring of court records and other sources, at least 6 people who have accused Maxwell and Epstein of grooming and abuse were at some point introduced to Trump through them. And one of them was a minor. And you can read her story in public court records. She said that she was brought to Mar-a-Lago by Jeffrey Epstein when she was 14 and introduced and said, and Epstein kind of nudged Donald Trump and said, this is a nice one, right? Something like that. So I don't know. I think the reader has to judge if 2 grown men are staying there with a 14-year-old, right? What message can you take from that? What should the men have assumed was happening? And that's a question for Trump to answer. He didn't want to answer any of our questions specifically. We got one blanket statement for a long list of questions. And we'll see if he ever answers those questions.
I recommend this to folks. The depth of the reporting is so impressive. Nicholas Confessori, it's always great to see you. I want to bring in Jennifer Freeman, special counsel at the Marsh Law Firm, who represents several of Jeffrey Epstein's survivors. Again, Jennifer, we always want to point this out. Trump has denied all knowledge of Epstein's abuse, but in general, is this new reporting just one more example of how little we, meaning the public, and maybe in some instances Congress, really know about Epstein and why your clients, these survivors, are trying so hard to get it all out there?
I think that's exactly right. And that is what our clients really want, is information, really important information, particularly about them. For example, we represent Maria Farmer, the first whistleblower to report Epstein and Maxwell in 1996. And what does she want? She wants her records. She wants her records, her conversations with the FBI to show that she was there in 1996 and again in 2006. And what did the government do? What did they know? When did they know it? What did they do? This is what the survivors want.
We have heard from some survivors that all the details we learn about Epstein can be re-traumatizing for them. And I wonder if your experience is that this drip, drip, drip of slow information is really painful, that if they had any power, they just want the information out there and they would like it out there at once?
That would be ideal. And this is something that they've been asking for and we've been asking for years. We asked for an investigation of what the FBI did and didn't do, what the government knew 2 years ago. More than that, we've asked for FOIA requests for decades. And what have we got? An answer that said, we will get back to you in November 2027. This is just unacceptable and really hard for survivors when they do get this drip, 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 and they really don't get any information on top of that.
Tomorrow is the deadline for the DOJ to release the Epstein files. I wonder what your expectation is and how you and your clients are feeling ahead of that.
There's a lot of trepidation. There's also a lot of concern. What are they going to withhold? These gals, these survivors want their records. And they want all the records to be released, all the files to be released, and they want all the information out there. They are very concerned what will happen and what the repercussions are for them, since they have been the subject of all kinds of public disrepute, public accusations, fear, and they really just want the truth out there, particularly their own records.
And Ghislaine Maxwell, as I'm sure you know, is now asking the court to amend or vacate her 2021 conviction, saying there is substantial new evidence to support her claim that her constitutional rights were violated. What do you think of that? What will it mean for your clients?
Well, the substantial new evidence includes things like concerns about juror number 50, who she also told the trial judge about and complained about it then, and the trial judge rejected that. She's also complaining, saying that it wasn't the right massage table that was input into evidence. I don't see substantial evidence that she is complaining about. And this makes, again, our clients fearful. For example, Annie Farmer, Maria's sister, was one of the witnesses at Ghislaine's trial. And she's very concerned, not only that she's been moved to a minimum security prison, not only that she's been given all this preferential treatment, but also that she's now seeking to be released. And this is a big concern for her and so many others who've been watching this trial so closely.
Jennifer Freeman, thank you so much for coming on the.
All right, folks, that was a deep dive into a very murky pond. What we've seen today is a classic example of how the media and certain political factions try to weaponize every single detail, every association, and every ambiguous comment to push a narrative, especially when it comes to figures like Donald Trump. We've tried our best to separate the legitimate concerns about government inaction and systemic failures from the thinly veiled attempts at guilt by association and political character assassination. The real villains here, the undeniable monsters, are Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and the profound systemic failures that allowed them to operate for so long. The survivors of their horrific crimes deserve nothing less than full transparency, complete accountability, and genuine justice, not endless delays, bureaucratic stonewalling, and cynical political maneuvering. Their fight for truth is the most important part of this story. So, what do you think? Are these reports genuine investigations into a complex network of power and abuse, or are they just another politically motivated hit job designed to keep a specific narrative alive? Let us know your unfiltered thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is crucial in cutting through the noise. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family who are tired of the media games, and subscribe to our channel for more unfiltered, common sense takes on the political stories that actually matter. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next breakdown, because we'll keep fighting for truth and calling out the BS every single time. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.